Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gallagher with the Aces Jiu-Jitsu Club podcast, interview series, whatever we're calling this thing. But we're putting some good content out for you guys to follow. And I'm pretty excited about my guest tonight because he is an old friend of mine that has had me on his show quite a few times. So it's time to reciprocate the favor. And we're going to come on and talk a little MMA. My guest tonight is Mr. Marc Charles. He is an MMA analyst for ESPN Radio, a producer for ESPN Radio. I apologize. He is also an MMA host for the Beasley Media Group here in Tampa, Florida, and he hosts the Octagon radio show. And he's an awesome dude with lots of knowledge on the topic, Mr. Marc Charles. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thank you so much, Kevin Gallagher. And I hope you have a good reference on a lawyer because it's not the Octagon radio.
Did I say Octagon? I tried so hard not to say Octagon.
UFC's lawyers are really powerful. I don't know if I want to go down that road.
It is the Octagram radio show, not the Octagon radio show.
Actually, I appreciate you fluffing up the name. It just gives it more promotion.
I, unlike Mr. Marc Charles, am not a professional at this. So Mark is here to make me look good. So I appreciate you for coming on again, man.
It's my pleasure, man. I love being on shows with you. It's always fun, man.
Yeah, man. Cool, man. So cool, man. Let's get right into it, man. We'll do the fluff and give the people what they want to hear. They don't want to talk to us. They want to hear about some fights. So let's talk UFC 252, man. Let's talk about what I think a lot of people are saying could be the battle to determine who the greatest heavyweight of all time in the UFC could be when we start to talk about Mr. DC and Stipe Miocic going at it for to end the trilogy for the rubber band match, man.
Yeah, three big questions come to mind. I did come into the show with two, and a third one just came up, and I'll mention that one first. And it's is there recency bias playing into this, like almost everything else that we talk about? The greatest featherweight of all time, the greatest lightweight of all time. A lot of recency bias. I'm not sure because, of course, Stipe only has one loss, and it is against DC, and DC does have quite the amazing accolades. If you look at DC's heavyweight career, although DC's career, I believe, is somewhere around 21-3 or something like that. Excuse me if I'm off by a couple. But if you look at his heavyweight career, he's 15-1. So they both have one loss. So I think that's a really important thing to think about going into the fight is both of them have one loss. They're pretty even there. But the one loss Stipe has is against DC. So if Stipe beats DC, does it really make him the greatest heavyweight of all time if DC has already beat him?
Right.
It's a very weird dynamic in that respect. Now, the other two questions that come to mind, other than recency bias, are number one, for DC, does DC actually retire if he wins? And for me, it's really tough to think that he actually does retire if he wins with so many big opportunities in front of him if he does have that heavyweight title. It would be great to see him go off in the distance, him being one of my favorites to watch. Before I give the third question, Kevin, I'd let you interject and tell me, your thoughts on the fight. And first of all, doing shows with you is like doing shows with Joey Diaz. Stipe Miocic. I love it. Stipe Miocic.
I can't.
I'm not. His name is Stipe Miocic in case he watches this and at least knows one of us knows how to say his name.
We'll probably get a letter from Mr. Stipe's attorneys as well. So I'm just getting the lawsuits ready to go. We've got a good lawyer team at AC Jiu-Jitsu Club.
So,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Before I toss it back, as I was saying, I'll just say my prediction. though. I think DC actually gets this one, and I don't think it's just based off of hard training and DC being a better fighter. This might sound a little bit odd, but Stipe, I think, has been involved in a lot more high-stress situations over the last course of the last few months since mid-March when the pandemic really hit. Him being a firefighter in Cleveland and being probably quite occupied by that. Not only with his time being occupied while he's at a firehouse, while he's on call, while he's out taking calls at work, but also when he's home, winding down and all that stuff that he's had to go through and that stress. I think that's going to play a big part in his preparation for this fight. Stipe really is one of the greatest of all time. Knocked out Verdum on his back foot with one shot. He really is one of the greatest. But I think we're in a very particular situation. DC is going to fight him in a small 25-foot cage. It's going to be easier to get to his legs and get that takedown. So just based off of preparation and the circumstances, and then also the smaller cage, which I don't think DC I don't think Stipe liked at all. I'm going to give this one to DC. I think DC gets away with the heavyweight title. 2-time heavyweight champion, 2-time lightweight champion, Strikeforce Grand Prix champion. Quite frankly, could be the greatest of all time.
Yeah, I agree with you in that vein as well. Like I think first of all that DC is going to win this fight too. I believe that Stipe pretty much owned. I'm sorry, DC. I think DC pretty much owned Stipe in the last fight, and then got caught with that huge right hand. Which again, when you talk about Stipe, you talk about that massive power that he has. He throws that right hand with such power and precision and balance, and it's one of the most formidable punches in all of mixed martial arts, simply because of the ease in which he throws it and the power behind it. So he's got that puncher's chance. But DC is I really believe that DC is better than him at pretty much all aspects of mixed martial arts, which when we talk about that in terms of the greatness of DC, it's very impressive to consider the fact that he was traditionally an Olympic wrestler. So now to be able to say, I come from the Olympic wrestling, break away from that wrestling background and be able to translate that into working to striking, because they're two very different, very distinct skill sets that require different muscle memory, different abilities to throw punches, different understandings of the human body. Like that alone puts him up there in the conversations for the greatest heavyweight of all time. And, Stipe's got a puncher's chance, but I really think DC is going to come away with this. And then, the small cage makes a huge difference too, because as Stipe likes to move, he likes to work around, he likes to circle, he likes to set up those angles for his punches, and DC he's not going to be able to do that with the smaller cage.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, but I think saying puncher's chance and Stipe in the same sentence are a little bit steep, if I can say that word, of a comment. I don't know about the puncher's chance, but I do know what you're saying. I do understand what you're saying. Is Stipe does have that his best chance of winning the fight is most likely catching Daniel like he did last time. But last time he had to set it up with the body shot. That's what it was. Stipe made an adjustment halfway through the fight, and DC was probably winning that fight handily up until that point. And then Stipe came in, made an adjustment, and found that body shot, and it really worked. And you could see it on DC's face. DC lost his poker face in the moment, and Stipe went in for the kill and won the fight.
Same way John Jones knocked him out with the body shot to the body, and the feint, gets his hands down, came up top with it.
It's the same way John Jones got him in the body first, and then the head kick pretty much did the damage. And then the last fight with Stipe, he made those adjustments. Now that Stipe already made the adjustment, now DC obviously has to make his adjustments. And it's going to be an interesting fight. We've seen both guys win decisively. It's never been any question. So it's really one of the best trilogies of all time. And it's hard to think of a better trilogy than this one. I mean, especially with them being heavyweights. Kane and Junior Dos Santos, of course, another legendary heavyweight trilogy, but not as competitive, not even close to being as competitive as these two guys who are going into a rubber match where both of them have separated each other from their consciousness in the last two fights. Whereas, when you had Kane and JDS, the couple of those fights were just, total one-sided beatings, which weren't that fun to watch. So this might be the best trilogy, one of the biggest, badass trilogies of all time. Can't think of a better one.
Talk to me a little bit about why Stipe doesn't get the recognition as the great heavyweight that he is. Part of it is because he's just not that flashy guy. He's not drawing the attention. He's not getting the fans to tune in for the pay-per-views. But it's odd to me that someone that has the longest winning streak in the history of the heavyweight division is not universally considered to be that great fighter. And there's almost this fight, if it wasn't for DC, would almost be an afterthought, and we still wouldn't really be talking that much about Stipe, even if he kept winning. It's kind of odd. Tell me what you think some of the reasons why that is.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to get some stats here real quick. Stipe's was a 3-fight stretch as the UFC heavyweight champion, which is the most of all time. I want to look up another one really quick. Excuse me for not knowing it, but you know what? I won't even look it up. I'll just close the window because I know it's at least 10 or 11. So you're talking about Stipe, who has 3 straight wins as a champion, right? Why doesn't he get the recognition? I'll answer the question, but first I'll ask a question. Why doesn't Demetrius Johnson with 10 or 11 wins in a row get the recognition, right? There's always these weird it factors where somebody doesn't get it. With Demetrius, it was because he didn't interject himself in anything other than really fight week. Once fight week is over and he was gone, he was on his Xbox making his money, doing the streaming and just doing his thing there. It wasn't really in the media. He would do some interviews, but he just wasn't out there. He wasn't really trying to create any buzz for himself. He's a true martial artist and he doesn't need to. He might be the best of all time. Him and John Jones would have to figure out a way to figure out who's better. But why doesn't a guy like that get the recognition? I think Demetrius is because he didn't interject himself in enough. Stipe is a very similar situation. Stipe is a very dry person. He's very dry humor. He's easy to ruffle his feathers. He's really easy to get him upset. He doesn't have a sense of humor unless he wants to be the person giving the sense of humor out. He's not going to let you put your sense of humor on him. I've seen it happen time and time again with him, but he has jokes for days. He is a funny person. He does like to laugh. When he's at the firehouse, I'm sure him and all his boys and all the friends there that work there, I'm sure that he's nothing but jokes there. But when he's in front of the fans and he's in front of the media cameras, he doesn't really let you give you his personality and then bounce his back. It's more, he's going to give you his personality. It's very dry. And his jokes most of the time don't really land because they're really stupid. To be quite frank, like he does have a very dumb very dumb sense of humor. It's not always like that spot on. It's like his comedic timing isn't that great, like some other fighters. So there's just a lot of things where there's a disconnect with him and fighters. Personally, he's one of my favorite fighters to watch. I enjoy him. He's not one of my favorite fighters to watch as an interview, though. I know that if I watch a Stipe interview, I'm not going to get a lot out of it, but I'm going to watch every little bit of it because there might be an Easter egg in there somewhere. That's a disconnect. It's unlike John Jones. If John Jones does a 20-minute interview, I'm watching it 3 times. I'm going to get a lot out of that. While John Jones ruffles feathers, there is not a disconnect between John Jones and the fans. Whether you hate him or you like him, there's not much of a disconnect. He gets it, and people he's on that same wavelength, pop culture and all that. With Stipe, it's just not really like that. Stipe is a cool guy. He's one of the he's going to be the coolest guy in the room wherever he goes. He is. However, on the mainstream level, he has a disconnect with the fans, and it's hard to point my finger on what it is, but that's got to be the answer for me.
Yeah, he being in the firehouse, and just to comment earlier when you talked about how working in that firehouse will be a deterrent for him. He's got a harder road than DC is. He's worked in a firehouse his entire time. I don't think that's going to bother him. Just my opinion. But when you talk about Stipe as the person, he has that kind of blue collar working man kind of appeal to him, and he doesn't work it in an ostentatious manner that draws attention. He's just a blue collar dude. He just comes to work. He does his job. If you interview him, he's going to answer the questions because he has to do it because it's part of the freaking job. He goes in there, he does his work, and he goes home. And that's just the way that he goes back to the firehouse. That's just the person he is, and that's the way he presents himself. And unfortunately, that just doesn't connect well with the fans. And like I tell my guys this all the time, my young fighters and guys that we have that are on the precipice of maybe going to the UFC that I work with, like, it's unfortunate, but that's the game, man. Like your game isn't just being a fighter. Your game is being exciting, and your game is making yourself marketable so that guys like Dana White will notice you and want to put you in the fights, want to make you come in and have people watch you,
If we could switch gears a little bit, but on the same subject, the co-main event, let's look at Sean O'Malley.
Yeah,
no disrespect meant to him, but his biggest win is against Eddie Wineland, who's so old, no disrespect to him, that he was the very first bantamweight fight ever in the UFC against Uriah Faber. The first one ever when they bought WEC.
That's crazy.
That's his biggest win, but he is the co-main event of UFC 252, right under the most legendary trilogy in the heavyweight history, with the title on the line and DC's legacy on the line and Stipe Miocic's fire truck on the line. And it's all just such a big, it's huge. But point is Sean O'Malley doesn't have a huge win. He has it.
That did face.
And the it's
clown hair
but the it's also includes first round knockouts as a string of them. So there is that. That's a very important factor to it. Is that he has his first round knockout. He dispatches people within 3 or 4 minutes in almost all of his fights on the UFC. That's a very important factor to it. So that when people look him up, and he's promoting himself and he's selling tie-dye t-shirts and people look him up online, it's not that he has 1 million followers, which he does. It's that when they look him up, it's a watchable 3-minute video of him dispatching somebody a few times. It's all these things that work together. So you can be as flashy as you want, but if you're not doing that kind of work in the cage like Conor McGregor did in his first few fights, dispatching people in the first round, which is exactly what he did all the way up until I think Nate Diaz was probably Chad Mendes, I believe, is the first person to get out of the first round with him. Right. Still dispatched him, I think, in the third or the fourth. So
second, I think it was. But anyway, whatever. You're probably right. You're probably right.
Yeah, sure. But it's that. So if Conor McGregor was who he was with all the talk he was, but he was winning fights, his first 2 fights to the decision, and the next one was a knockout, and the next one is a decision, I don't think it'd be the same thing. So you have to have it. With those intangibles, those things that you can't really see, like the charisma and all those things that come with it. But you also have to have the highlight reel to really pop, like guys like Conor are, and guys like Sean O'Malley want to. He's talking about being like a Conor McGregor. I'm not sold yet. He's about to fight Cheeto tomorrow, Vera. And, no disrespect to that, but also another guy who's just a black belt jiu-jitsu artist. I should have said that. That was a terrible choice of word. Who is a respectable black belt in jiu-jitsu, but not a very impressive stand-up artist. Sean O'Malley is a stand-up artist. Right. He is a Picasso. He's like a new coming Picasso who knows how to come in there and do some really cool stuff. And they're putting up against a ground guy. If he beats him on the feet and knocks him out, that's great. And then if he gets choked out, he's Sean O'Malley, who isn't an expert in jiu-jitsu and it's justifiable. But
choked out by the black belt, right?
He has to fight a guy in the bantamweight division, like maybe a Frankie Edgar, who's going to stand there and box him, and who's so good at it that he have to be, you've got to be great to beat him. He's got to fight somebody like that at bantamweights to really prove, I believe, that he is that good, because he is good, but he's good against B-level fighters. He has not fought an A-level fighter yet. So that has to happen first, and that unfortunately is not on Saturday. Unfortunately, Saturday he's still fighting B-level fighter who is a A-level ground fighter.
Yeah, but in defense of that placement, like Dana White knows what he's doing. Dana White knows that he is the princess of the ball right now, the belle of the ball right now. So he's putting him in that prime spot because people are going to watch it. And much like Conor McGregor, not that they threw Conor McGregor lobs, but they kind of did. They put him in there with Dennis Severs, guys.
But Dennis Severs not much of a lob. He was a little bit old, but it proved that Conor was easily taking those guys out, right? Dennis Seaver was easy for Conor, and it looked easy, right? And Dennis Seaver's a hard dude, tough dude from overseas, right? Conor made it look easzy. Yeah. You just made a point there, right? He's the belle of the ball, right? And he's getting the co-main event. You know who the belle of the ball was and got the main event? It was a similar situation, had a couple decent wins, got pushed a little bit too quick. I'll name one, Sage Northcutt, and guess who else? Paige Van Zandt. Yeah. Where are they?
Yeah, exactly.
You got to be really careful with that. Yeah, exactly. They are taking it fairly slow with Sean, so it contradicts what I'm trying to say. But until he gets to that level, I'm not going to go spend $40 on his gear and go and compare him to Conor McGregor. It's just irresponsible as someone who covers media. You can't jump that quickly until he has the quality wins he's been showing against high level quality fighters. But I don't want to sound like a hater. I'm just being realistic about who he's beat. I think he looks great. I want him to succeed. I just want to see it against some higher level people.
Well, as the professional that you are, we're going to segue right into Miss Paige Van Zandt right off of your cue. So thank you very much for that lob. Speaking of Miss Paige Van Zandt, let's talk a little bit about her recent departure from the UFC and move into bare knuckle boxing, which I am not a big fan of personally, but we can get to that later. What do you think? What do you think drove her? First of all, she turned down the Bellator contract and decided to go to bare knuckle boxing. What do you think drove her to do that? And money's obviously the reason, but what are some of the other factors you think involved?
Uh, I don't know if it's money. Money has a lot to do with it, but there's something else. A point that I want to make. I'm checking my phone because I texted CEO and owner David Feldman to ask him if he has a quote for us.
Right.
Also to triple confirm it as well. But it looks real. I mean, everyone's reported on it. I believe that the reason that she would sign with them and turn Bellator down, I believe maybe, and this is not confirmed, this is just an educated guess, that she got a shorter term contract for around the same money, or maybe a little less than Bellator, but around the same money for maybe 1 or 2 fights. But Bellator is probably trying to get her on for 4, 6 fights. Right. I don't think Bellator was going to bring her on for a couple fights to just let her, build her stock, basically her promotion and stuff. So I think Bellator, and this is not confirmed. We don't have much information yet. It's very brand new. Just came out today about her signing with BKFC, but I think that is probably a little bit shorter. Maybe 1 fight. Might have been 1 fight for all we know. I mean, David Feldman's done that with high level names. He'll do that to get somebody in and have a good fight. Paulie Malignaggi, a 1 fight deal. So
do you think based upon that she's looking to get out? You think she just wants to get paid and be done? She doesn't want to have any more long-term fights. She's kind of run her course.
No, I think it's just a great launch pad for her. Sorry, what I mean by that is it's an easier short-term launch pad for her. By the end of the year, she might be able to be signed with another MMA promotion for a better deal than Bellator offered her. By going to BKFC for 1 fight, getting bloody, getting viral, people, viral videos and stuff, just her fighting bare knuckle is going to be viral. That alone. The cutest, the little, cute cheerleader type of girl that all the guys love on Instagram. She makes a freaking $1 million or whatever a year on Instagram just because of how she looks like. And she's going to fight bare knuckle. People are going to watch that.
Yeah.
Probably close to what the Paulie Malignaggi number was. She might even beat that, just based off of who she is. Quite frankly, yeah.
They're very smart at bare knuckle boxing. Their promotional IQ is very high. They understand how to get these faces and get these names and boost the hell out of their events to make people tune in and watch. They do a very, very good job of building a new brand in that manner. And I think they're trying to piggyback off of Paige Van Sant the same way they piggyback off of Artem and Lombard and all the other guys they brought in to fight.
Yeah, I once asked David Feldman, I kind of just asked him bluntly, how do you afford a guy like, Paulie Malignaggi? You guys are brand new, how are you guys able to do that? I know that Paulie made some good money going there for sure. He made a few $100,000, maybe more. And for a newer company like bare knuckle, it's a lot of money. Paulie might have made more than a few $100,000, but I asked him, how do you do it? And if you're not making money off of it, how are you able to continue to keep doing that with these, let's say he did Paulie Malignaggi, and then he wants to keep doing these big names, and we're not sure if you're not getting a return on it, what's your motivation? And I loved his answer. He said that he's not bringing guys like Paulie in to make money off of him. He's bringing guys like Paulie in to build his promotion. He's thinking long term. I know David Feldman for maybe a few years now, close to about 2 or 3 years or so. He's a stand-up dude. He's a really good business person. But I also know people who worked with him up in I like Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, up in the Northeast. He promoted hundreds of promotion fight nights up there with boxing. He's also a former professional boxer. His dad's a former professional boxer, but he promoted hundreds of boxing shows up there, and people don't have anything bad to say about him.
Yeah,
he's a good promoter, and with that kind of experience that he has with the hundreds of shows, I'm talking about, I believe he did about 300 shows up in the Northeast or so, from my understanding. And then with his attitude of the way he's willing to promote and build and lose, maybe he's losing. I might be wrong. He might be profiting, but willing to lose to build the promotion and willing to lose more than once to keep building. And then also being a stand-up guy and honest and never having, a track record for hundreds of shows of being that kind of promoter that people want to talk bad about. He just has a really good thing going. It's a really and then it's working out as well. You know, every time he has a show, people are interested in it. Granted, not every show is as big as Paulie Malignaggi or as big as the Artem and Jason Knight, you know, bloodbath, but he keeps people interested, and he keeps what's also really important, he keeps the media interested. The media is always really interested in what he's going to do next. And I think that's a special place to be. No offense to Ken Shamrock, one of my greatest people of all time, and just in fighting and pop culture period, but nobody's asking what Ken Shamrock's doing next with his bare knuckle promotion that he did. And Ken Shamrock has a huge name. Right. So David Feldman has his thumb and his finger on something. And it's just I think for him, it's a matter of time just until he can get the bodies back in the buildings. And then that's when he can start really growing his brand again. Because bare knuckle, you know, that's another thing where you really need an audience. It's just one of those things. So I think it's a great thing. Paige Van Zandt going there is an interesting ride. I think we'll be intrigued with whatever she does there, no matter what. Just her fighting bare knuckle is intriguing in its own. So we'll see who they match her up with. They sign Beck Rawlings? Didn't Beck Rawlings fight there? Is that who it was?
Maybe, yeah. I don't. Again, I wish I followed more professional fighting. I live this life all day long, and I watching fights. I just don't do it anymore because I'm at the gym all freaking day long.
So,
I wish I knew more about it. I know Jim Ayers though. Jim Ayers is really cool.
I'm about to connect some dots right now.
Let's do
Beck
it.
Rollins, I just confirmed Beck Rollins did fight with BKFC. I don't know if she's still under contract, but she fought BKFC at least once, maybe twice. And she's also the one that Paige Van Zandt did the karate kick knockout on in UFC. Mm-hmm. That could be the bare knuckle fight right there. And that's money
right there.
That's the money. Right. That's the money. I think that's it. That's the prediction.
Let me ask you a question real quick, because I'm not going to lie to you and say that I'm not a little bit turned off or discouraged by the onset of bare knuckle boxing, simply because I believe it's kind of the lowest common denominator of putting these guys in the ring with no gloves on, beating each other to the pulp. Then you have it's one thing to have small gloves in an MMA fight because you knock them on the ground, then you can grapple on the ground and they stop the fight immediately when there's a knockout. But to have that 10 standing 8 count in the count to get him back up again, to continue taking a beating with no gloves on, there's a bit of it that's barbaric to me. And I've talked to some fighters that I trust and respect that have told me that, they thought the same thing too. Then when they competed and they realized that it was something they loved. But it's still hard for me to get that stigma out of my mind. Make me a believer.
You're a boxer. Right. You are a traditional boxer. You boxed coming up. So you, not gonna lie, a little surprised that you're even asking, but I'll try to keep it simple. In boxing, guys are swinging for the fences a lot, right? You got those gloves on, especially the heavyweights. They got to swing for the fences, get the knockouts, rock the guy. They swing hard. UFC, they're swinging just as hard. Right. They're swinging real hard because you got that nice 4-ounce padding. I mean, it's beautiful, right? It's like it's perfect. When you get into the bare knuckle fighting, and by no means am I a bare knuckle fighter, but just like you, I spoke to several bare knuckle fighters. I spoke to David Feldman specifically about this exact question. Why is this not more brutal? Why are you telling us that this is? Because they're telling us it's safer, but we're seeing nothing but blood, right? It took a little bit of explaining, but I became a believer and I started to understand what happens with bare knuckle fighting. They're almost never swinging for the fences because, number one, you're going to break your hand pretty quickly. Almost right away, you're going to break your hand. As soon as you crack someone's skull and you're swinging too hard, you're going to break your hand. So what happens in bare knuckle, it's precision boxing. It's something Conor McGregor might be really good at, actually, because it becomes you're no longer, and I'm making numbers up here, but you're no longer throwing 100%. Now you're probably throwing between 50 and 70% for most of the fight, maybe a little less, because those punches, I mean, they if you hit the right spots with bare knuckle, they're much more damaging and precise than if you hit with with a glove and you hit 20% more. But it's just it becomes a precision thing. But now you're hitting a little bit. You're hitting a little bit lighter. You're not hitting as hard. and the cuts are very cosmetic. You have a lot less concussions in bare knuckle boxing. I think that's one of the most important points I need to make. I don't mean to bury it in the middle.
No, you're good. Yeah, exactly. CTE is
I
a real
sort of
thing.
buried the lead there.
That's why I believe boxing is a whole lot worse than MMA.
Sure, I sort of buried the lead. Right. You're going to get a lot less concussions in bare knuckle, because in bare knuckle you're getting a lot more. You're getting knockdowns, but they're not as much. They're not as concuss based. You're not getting the repeated blow to the head like in MMA. Let's be honest, it's a little safer than boxing, because you're not getting the 3, 4, 5 standing 8 counts of being basically knocked out and then being good enough, tough enough to have your wits back, like you can do in boxing, and then going at it again. MMA, you get knocked out once and it's done. So a little safer than boxing, in my opinion. But in MMA, let's be honest, few of these hammer fists to the side of the head, that's damaging, right? You're not going to get that at bare knuckle. Bare knuckle is just a different sport. I don't know if I'm being as etiquette as I could be in the explanation of it, because there's a little bit of a curveball by you. But from the explanations I've gotten, it's precision boxing versus heavy hitting. You can't hit as hard. You just can't swing at somebody's head like that with the bare knuckle. Otherwise, you're going to break your hand right away. So there's an art to it, and it actually becomes a bit beautiful. And that's why I think the guys and gals fall in love with it that the way they do. We watch it and we think, wow, they're never going to do that again. But then they interview and they say, I can't wait to do that again.
Right. I noticed when like I said, I'm pretty good friends with Jim Ayers, and I had him on the Old Man Grappling Hour podcast, and we talked a little bit about that. Jim Ayers is one of the champions of bare knuckle.
Yeah, I know Jim Ayers, former UFC fighter, man. Yeah, he's amazing bare knuckle fighter.
And just an awesome, all around awesome dude. Like, he's really, really smart, intelligent, does well with his money, real top notch guy.
He had a good feud with former UFC legend. I forgot his name, the crazy guy. I forgot his name, but he was not that. No,
Diego Sanchez. I'm trying to think of the crazy guy. There's a lot of them.
No, they're not. He fought in bare knuckle. Chris Lieben. And Chris Lieben was going psycho on him. Right. And Jim did a good job of keeping his cool, as he is a cool guy, right?
Yeah. But I so there's maybe there's a bit of a moralistic conflict with me when I just think about the overall like degradation of our modern society. And there's just something about the idea of two guys fighting each other with no gloves on that I get the specifics of it. I get the science of it. I understand the positions you're coming from, but it's hard for me to discount the barbaric nature of it. Just watching these guys get their faces all cut up with no gloves on. And just like Jim said the same thing. He said, literally you break your hand, the first 3 punches you throw, your hands are broken, but you got to keep going. After every fight, his hands are all swelled up like watermelons. It's difficult for me to swallow it. But because fighters dig it and I see that they're enjoying it, and I talk to fighters that say it's legit, I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt. And they do a good job with the promotions. So let's move on a little bit, man. Let's move on to the next topic. Let's talk a little bit about the Contender Series from last night, right? Was it last night or the night before?
It was last night, Tuesday.
Tuesday night.
Yeah,
right?
Tuesday, August 11th. Yes.
Correct. So the biggest thing with the Contender Series, and I had Ray Longo on the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast a couple months ago, right when he had awesome dude,
boxing coach legend, UFC.
He trains Matt Frivola. And I met him a couple times in Vegas, and he took a liking to me.
And several former UFC champions.
And several for Chris Weidman, bunch of guys. But
Matt Serra,
of course. Forget about Matt Serra, but he is literally just such an awesome, genuinely cool, like straight up Jersey Italian guy. Just amazing dude to talk to, real fun to talk to. But the point of the matter is, we talked a lot about the state of the UFC and MMA in general post-COVID. And one of the things he did say is the fact that, the UFC will be fine because they have exemptions and they can fight on Fight Island, and they have enough money to be able to sustain a marketable, feasible, money plan or game plan, right? Without having to have a live audience, because they have the benefit of ESPN, they have the benefit of pay-per-view, and they can still generate income through that. When you talk about smaller venues, which are typically the feeder pools for the UFC, like, they are not going to function anymore. They're not going to be able to have events without an audience. It's infeasible for them. they can't put new fighters in, which means now the UFC won't have new fighters to come in to rotate back in again when guys have to leave. Now we're missing that new talent. Talk about the function of the Contender Series based upon that.
Right. The Contender Series is and always has been probably the best bridge between the feeder system and the UFC. I think that's why Dana's continued on with it. They've put the Ultimate Fighter on the back burner, I think, because the Ultimate Fighter is a production. It's a little bit different. Contender Series are just straight up fights, right? So you're putting on a fight night, so he's getting to do that. So there's a lot that they love about the Contender Series, but the most important thing is that it's been the best bridge from the feeders into the UFC. The Ultimate Fighter is more intriguing, maybe in funner content to watch, but Contender Series you're able to bang out more of them, right?
Oh yeah, you get five. You could have literally four new fighters every Tuesday night with major contracts in the UFC just off of one.
You're basically doing an Ultimate Fighter.
Right.
You're basically doing an Ultimate Fighter season every night.
Every 9 days.
You're getting one out of the way every night. So
every night, right.
It's always been a really good feeder. But what's special about last night, I don't think it's happened before. It may have, but stands out because of where we're at right now. And it's that the UFC handed out 5 contracts last night to all 5 winners on the UFC Tuesday night Dana White Contender Series. Now, the question was asked to Dana White in the post-fight press conference, and Dana didn't say that it was true, but they asked him, they said, is this because, are you signing all 5 fighters at once tonight because of the state of MMA where there's a lot less feeder, going on. There's a lot less talent that you're able to bring in and, from internationally and so on and so forth. And is it just more of a sort of a logistics thing to sort of accommodate to the times we're in? And Dana said no. He said, of course, all the guys deserved it and this and that. And it's sort of like, well, it's sort of questionable, right? I mean, one of the guys lost last night, I think, because he broke his arm posting up on a takedown. Shades of Shogun against Mark Coleman 15 years ago in Pride Championship when Shogun broke his arm or dislocated or whatever and ended the fight. And that's how the guy lost last night. Did the guy that did that to him, if that happened 4 months ago on Contender Series, would that guy get a contract?
Yeah, we'll get you another shot next season.
Yeah, we'll get you another shot. Exactly. He'll get another shot, but not. And then there'd be nights where no one would get a contract, and there'd be nights where one guy would get a contract, right?
Right.
So, yeah, last night we had 5 contracts given out. Yeah. God bless their souls. It's awesome. That's great. We're going to see if they're cut out for it because lately we've seen guys be completely not cut out for the UFC more often than we've ever seen in the past. We've seen you guys get called in either either from the Contender Series or not even in from the Contender Series, just based off of the region that they're in, based off of convenience, based off of people hitting Dana White up and saying, hey, sign this guy. Like, that's where we're at right now. And I'm not trying to water down the UFC too much. I'm not trying to say Dana White is, desperate or anything like that, but people are literally hitting up Dana White from what we hear and saying, hey, you got to check this guy out, sign him. And they're fighting on Abu Dhabi like weeks later.
Right.
So that's where we're at right now. So the Contender Series is going to play a major part in this time we're in to feed fighters in. But if I can make one final point on that, I think the most important thing the UFC really should do moving forward is this: sign 5 guys a week. That's fine. But when those guys get their next fights, have them fight each other. This might sound a little bit cruel, but have them weed each other out. Right. Don't put these guys up against Sean O'Malley or up against some guy, these veterans or whatever, gatekeepers. Don't do that because they're going to get wrecked. Right. That's what's happening. So let them weed each other out. You almost want to sort of model it like a sort of like a tournament in a sense where where there's sort of 6 guys in it and they're each going to or 8 guys rather, and they're each going to like fight it out in the next few fight nights, over the course of a few months or whatever. And you sort of weed guys out because they're going to sign 5 guys a night. You're going to have 1 or 2 of those guys who are going to give up on the bench, like we've seen happen. We don't see that in the UFC traditionally. We just don't. But we've been seeing it. So if you're going to want to get rid of that kind of fighter especially on your bigger shows, you're going to want to have them weed each other out. Don't bring a guy in off a Contender Series knockout where he does a spinning back fist or a spinning back kick on some guy who shouldn't even really be there anyway. No offense to anyone, but I'm just being blunt. And that's sort of what's happening. They're doing a spinning back kick on a D or E level fighter, not a C or a B level fighter, that should be getting right there to the UFC. They're doing it against someone who they're fighting down to, and then it looks great, and then they put him against somebody in the UFC who's legit, and then it's not even fair. So bring in as many guys as you want, but my opinion is you gotta fight them against each other over the course of the next 6 months. Don't put them against anyone else other than each other. People from the Contender Series for like the next 6 months or so. They get two or three wins against each other. Put them up against somebody who's fighting to get in the top 15. That's when you put them up against somebody who's trying to get in the top 15.
Yeah,
not a top 15 guy, but so anyways, that's how I think they should do it.
I agree with you. I agree with you in that. I didn't watch it, so I can't vouch for the competitiveness or the viability of the fighters that got selected. I will say that if you connect the dots, it does sound a bit suspicious. It's not easy, not too hard to come to that conclusion based upon the fact that the UFC is in dire need of new talent, and maybe Dana White is lowering the bar a bit based upon that. And it seems to me that if Dana White would have disagreed with whatever reporter asked him that question, he would have had no problems at all in the past or currently in telling that reporter, you're absolutely wrong. That's the dumbest question you ever asked. This is the UFC. We only take the best. So it seems
he politely
pretty
said
logical.
That yesterday.
Yeah.
Politely, that's what he said.
Politely, right, exactly. But it might not have been as vigorously done as it would have been if it was not true. But it's up to discrimination or up to fucking to debate.
I wouldn't be upset, or I wouldn't hold it against Dana or like point at him and say, haha, if he said, hey, look, we're going to have big fights. We're about to have DC Stipe. We're about to have Khabib Justin. But look, yes, there's another approach to this game that we have right now. We are doing a rebuild stage on as well. We have the biggest fights in the world. We have the best fighters in the world, but we are also rebuilding our roster, at the ground level with some new guys. There's nothing wrong with saying that, but Dana is, he at heart he has a certain ego at heart where he has to kind of stand strong with, nothing's wrong. It's perfect, and it's actually better than it's ever been, and that's just the attitude he's always had. And
yes,
all power to him.
He's the ultimate promoter, and it's funny. He's one of those promoters that doesn't necessarily promote just to promote. He actually makes himself believe his promotion. That's what makes him so great. Like, he doesn't just say things just to say things, but people want to see it. He actually makes himself believe that own hype, and it's very apparent in the way he explains himself, and the way he's a very confident person in that regard.
Yeah, it's interesting how he'll talk about a guy like Masvidal or something when he's talking positive about them, and the way he'll frame it, and he has a really smart way of, and it's kudos to him, a really smart and great way of not saying Masvidal's the most popular of all time, but making it sound like it, right? At the time that he needs to. He's really great at that. He can do the same thing with a guy like Colby, right? He's not going to say Colby's the most popular guy of all time, but when Colby is about to fight and Dana's having an interviewing or doing a scrum, and he's in that mode where he needs to push that fight, he'll say, well, hate him or love him, you look at the internet, this guy, everybody, whether you like him or hate him, everybody wants to see this guy. Like, everybody wants to see him fight. Like, he's really good at that. Just as you're saying, he's really good at spin. I don't mean to say that like negatively about the guy, but he is good at spin. He knows how to not just promote a fight, but sort of put a spin to it. And it does seem like every fight that's the biggest fight ever sort of is the biggest trending fight of all time, and it sort of has become a trend. I'd love to see the analytics to see if that's actually true, but that seems to be the trend of the way Dana describes all the big fights, all the ones that are doing like really big and are always trending really well. he'll say that it's the highest trending fight or of all time. So that's an interesting trend. So he has a way of spinning and promoting the fight without really lying to you, but saying what he needs to say and what he wants to say.
Yeah, he is. If you talk about great promoters of all time, like has to be up there in the conversation, especially fight promoters. That guy is more than likely single-handedly responsible for the explosion and the growth of the UFC from the place it was after the Philippe Bitter took over it.
The only other person, just in case you're about to switch gears, I just wanted to interject.
Yeah.
The only other person that I would really compare to him isn't exactly an MMA promoter, but it's Vince McMahon from the WWE. I mean, there's a guy who took his great grandfather's circus promotion because it was all in the circus way all back in the day, and he turned that into the biggest promotion and basically kind of in the world, in a sense, global. But the thing about that, it's not just, it's the reason I put him up there and maybe a notch above Dana in terms of as a promoter is because Vince actually laid out the tracks for what they do as on a global platform. And it's no secret, but Dana won't really say, but it's no secret that the UFC has went to WWE headquarters. They've met with the WWE and Vince McMahon to sort of, not to collaborate, but to consult.
Right.
I don't know if they pay them. I don't know how that works, but
isn't it the same parent company too? Isn't it the same parent
no,
company?
No, WWE is a family-owned, publicly traded company. So the McMahons own the Vince McMahon and his family. They own a majority of it, but it is a publicly traded company. Whereas the UFC has like an owner like Ari Emanuel, and then a bunch of investors and stuff. And so but the UFC is not public. But the point is that Vince McMahon truly did lay the foundation for a global promotion that takes its kind of one-off show or concert style show year round, mind you, all over the world, and laid out that platform of how to make the digital money, the WWE network, all this. So I don't want to get into wrestling. It's just, the point is like that whole promotion and the landscape of that global promotion for a combat sports, that's Vince McMahon. But Dana White, I mean, he has just as good of a story. He convinces his partners to buy UFC for $3 million, and then a few years later, they're selling it for $4.02 billion.
He was a bartender in Boston.
It's crazy,
right?
I mean, it's insane.
White,
He has grown it to be the standard in MMA. I don't care who you are in MMA or what your promotion is. You work up to the UFC. I don't care if you're one or if you're Bellator.
Everything else,
work up to UFC.
Everything else is the minor leagues, and I don't.
That's right. They're the NFL. They are the MLB.
Right. You might get paid. You might do pretty well for yourself because you're bringing a name, but if you're not the champion in the UFC, you're not the greatest fighter in that weight class, and that's period. All right, let's move on. Let's talk one more subject, because I know you were interested in talking about it. It's something we should all be interested in talking about, because it could be one of the better fights that we'll see in recent times in the UFC if we can figure out a way to make it happen.
Brother, why you have to bring up this fight, brother?
You know the
location. Brother.
We can fight here. Here I am. You fight here. We fight right now.
Why, brother? I have to think about this fight now, brother.
So we're talking about Mr. Justin Gaethje and Khabib. There we go. Obviously,
Khabib and the bottom row at your eye doctor. At the eye doctor,
exactly, 100%. I wasn't even going to attempt to say his last name.
I spent many hours studying the name Nurmagomedov so I could say it properly, and then now I'm told I'm not saying it right. It's Nurmagomedov. I mean, get out of here.
Well, that fight has been spoken about. Obviously, Khabib just lost his father, so he's probably going through some times with that. And I don't know if they've lifted the restrictions on travel from Russia yet, or any of the situations, the stipulations to keep him from coming to the States. But I know Justin's ready to go. Justin wants that fight. Everybody wants that fight. That is the other red panty night besides Conor McGregor. Anyone that can fight Khabib is in for a big payday, but they're also in for a pretty rough fight, man. Well, I don't see how anybody can beat that guy.
They're also in for not just the payday. I don't think it's the same kind of Conor payday you'd get for fighting Conor or whatever, but you're in for a freaking launch pad of a lifetime for your legacy.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's nothing
100%.
like it. If you could beat Conor McGregor, it's not going to do for your legacy what it'll do if you beat Khabib Nurmagomedov.
No, you beat Khabib. You're beating arguably one of the best pound for pound fighters, quite possibly the best that's ever fought. If he comes back and puts another string of wins together against some big hand, that's what Khabib is fighting for his legacy at this point.
I think this is it for him. I think he fights Justin, and then regardless of what happens with Justin, I think that the UFC and Dana White they love Khabib so much, they're going to bring in GSP for whatever it takes. I think that's what happens. Khabib does not tweet people's names for fun.
Right.
That's not what he does. He doesn't go. Or I don't know if it was on Twitter or Instagram, but basically he said Justin in October, or maybe November, whatever it is, Justin in October, and then GSP in April.
Right.
That's from his official account, and nobody has a hold of his account. And I think that's as clear as he can make it. And here's the other really interesting part of it. His dad's dream was for him to have his final fight against GSP.
There you go.
So it's just one of those things where I think this is it. I think he fights Justin. It's an amazing fight. Whatever happens, it's going to be one of the most intriguing fights since, Conor and Nate 2, which was like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? Or even Conor Nate 1. That was really intriguing, right? We were watching Conor do all this stuff, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh no, not Nate Diaz, right? What Nate Diaz does to everybody.
Right.
Either chokes you out or he exhausts you, and you have nowhere to go.
And he did both to Conor.
He did both to Conor, but Conor did get the best on the second one. But the point is this matchup, it's I don't know if it's as good as the Tony and Khabib matchup. I'll still always want to see Tony Khabib forever, but the Justin matchup, I think Justin, from what he's shown and what he's done, I think he has the best chance ever of beating Khabib, better than Tony's chances, especially 100%. With what we saw with Tony and Justin. Not trying to do MMA math. I'm not saying because Justin beat Tony can't beat Khabib. I'm saying because of Justin's style and how good of the scrambler and wrestler Justin is naturally. It doesn't have to even really train for that. That's just something he is great at.
All-American. I think it was
since he was a baby.
Something like that. He wrestled from a kid.
But what he does train for and what he just showed in his last fight against Tony is a stand-up artist, is that his adjustments he's made with Trevor Whitman as a boxer are phenomenal. Justin Gaethje's striking is the best it's ever been. Yeah. Justin Gaethje's throwing, I think, less than 50% of the volume he was throwing before, but he's doing way more damage and doing so much better than he's getting hit way less. And it's Trevor Whitman. Trevor Whitman's done amazing. In the last fight that Justin had against Tony, in the middle of the fight, at the end of one of the rounds, Tony dropped Justin with an uppercut. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was like Tony's best show that he had in that showing he had in the fight. He dropped him with an uppercut, and then we had the round was over right there, and we are like, oh my God, what would have happened, right?
Right.
Justin went back to the stool, and Trevor Whitman said, he's like, see what happens when you don't do what we've been doing.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, but Justin said, I'm sorry. It was just so much fun. I had to, but and he's like, he's not going to do it anymore. And he didn't do that anymore. And by that, I mean, get irresponsible with it, get into that firefight kind of thing. Trevor Whitman has pulled him out of that and molded him into like a really, really good technical striker boxing, who is smarter than he's ever been with his striking. So with that said, we've seen guys like Michael Johnson, Michael Johnson's a good fighter, but Michael Johnson is a middle of the top 15 fighter. Justin Gaethje has blown his way through all those guys, basically, including Michael Johnson, right? But Michael Johnson dropped Khabib with a good punch. I think Justin Gaethje has a very good chance of dropping Khabib. He's in outboxing Khabib. Khabib is a little bit stubborn with his game plan. Khabib always almost takes a round in boxes with a striker, no matter who they are. He just loves it. He just loves to prove that he can beat you. He might not win the round like he did with Conor, but he wants to win the fight, but not just wrestle. If he does that with Justin for a whole round, I don't know, man.
He could get slapped.
he can get slept. Can Khabib hold Justin down like he's done everyone else? Is Justin Gaethje a better wrestler than everyone else Khabib's fought like I believe he is? These are the questions going into that fight. I think that everybody wants to see answered, and I think the answer to those, I don't believe. I'm not just saying confidently that Justin Gaethje wins this fight, but I think the answer to that question is yes. Justin Gaethje is the best wrestler that Khabib has fought, including Tony Ferguson, because Tony Ferguson wrestled at a college in Michigan. All respect to him and that team, but Justin Gaethje is an All-American wrestler.
In wrestling since he was a kid.
Right.
I'll retort with a few things on what you said because one of the things I did notice that's pretty well documented about Gaethje is we had Laura Sacco on the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. We talked about this right after their
Laura
fight.
Sanko,
yeah, fuck it's whatever. You get the general idea. Thank you.
You see that, again. Laura? I knew your name.
So the one thing we did notice and we talked about when we talked about Gaethje is the fact that he has matured greatly as a fighter. Like he is showing signs that you know what, you can't just go out there and bang, 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 bang. First of all, your shelf life is going to be very small. No matter what you believe, people just don't have that many wars inside of them, and their brains get scrambled, and you just start getting knocked out, and you can't stop that. And secondly, you're just not going to be able to perform at the highest levels fighting like that because guys are going to be smarter than you. They're going to be able to move, and you got to do it for 5 rounds.
Justin switched at the perfect time.
Exactly.
He would have gotten. I think he would have gotten cut up and slept by a guy like Tony. But
yeah, if he tried to go out there, went toe to toe with him. So that's one thing, and the fact that he hits harder than probably any other fighter, and God, he hits so hard. God, he puts so much into every punch he throws,
and they're never just one punch either.
No, he throws that leg kick, then comes back over the top with the punch over the top. He goes to the body.
His leg kick in the clinch. The guy can throw a leg kick in the clinch so beautifully. He has a really interesting leg kick technique that he can throw very close up.
I will also say this about Khabib. The one thing that I believe will beat Khabib, I don't think there's any fighter in the history of the planet, maybe GSP, that can beat Khabib if Khabib goes out there and implements his game plan. I don't think I disagree with you in thinking that Gaethje has the wrestling to be able to stop Khabib. I don't think anyone can stop Khabib when he's on his game. I've never in my life seen another fighter be able to just not, and this is there's a thing to this. There's a little nuance to this. Not just to be able to hang on someone and completely take them down and drain their life out of them like a 155-pound steel blanket, but to be able to implement damage at every step of the way in the manner that Khabib is able to do that, constantly hitting. He just sucks people's lives away, and I watch him do it continually over and over and over again. I watched a highlight reel of him doing it to some guys that were elite level wrestlers, all-American wrestlers, and just drains their life away. I don't think anyone can stop that, but I will say this. I agree with you in the fact that Khabib likes to prove the point that he is not just one-dimensional, and he will go out there and he'll try to stand and strike with people out of hubris. And I see this time and time again with fighters that just, if you just go out there and do what you're amazing at, you're going to win 99% of the fights. You've earned that ability to do that because you're the champ, because you're the greatest ever. But guys want to prove the doubters wrong. They want to say, I am not just that wrestler. I'm a better striker, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to beat this guy at his own game. And if Khabib tries to do that with Justin, who knows? Maybe he does. But he also is putting himself in serious, serious danger. I was very concerned about his fight with Conor when he did it with Conor. I was very, very seriously concerned when he was fighting with Gaethje because Gaethje will put him to sleep.
I'll paraphrase, if I could paraphrase Gaethje in a recent interview that I might be off by a word or two, but I have the idea down. And Gaethje said something to the effect of it's going to be Gaethje's death zone versus Khabib's deep ocean drowning.
I like that. That's a very good comparison. I like that very well. Well, anyway, so We're running up on an hour here. I think we got enough, man. We got some good conversations on UFC 252. I mean, DC and Stipe, man, that's an intriguing fight for several different reasons. We talked about, Paige Van Zandt and the bare knuckles. We talked about what else? We talked about the Contender Series and Gagey and Khabib. I think we got some good things for the people at home to think on, man. And once again, I really appreciate you coming on the show. You're an awesome person, and you're obviously a professional, and you made me look good. So I thank you very much for that.
That's very kind of you.
Anything that you would like to, anything you'd like to plug, any of your shows, anything you want to talk about before I kick you out of here?
No.
Yeah. a man. There he is. You can go check out Marc Charles on the Octagram radio show, so we don't get sued, and you can see him on his various aspects for production for you. As for
I wish everyone would mess up. I wish everyone would mess up the radio show on the first intro, so I could be like, no, it's called this, and then we could talk. Basically, it's a 30-minute commercial or 30-second commercial.
You get much more.
I get the whole spot. Yeah, I get the. It's like a pre-roll spot for the podcast.
Well, so folks, thank you very much. I've been Kevin Gallagher with the Aces Jiu-Jitsu Club podcast interview series. I had an opportunity to speak for an hour with my great friend and really cool dude, Marc Charles, very knowledgeable on the topic. And, go watch the fights tomorrow night. It's going to be a good show. Go watch that DC Stipe fight, and maybe we can figure out who the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time is, and then we can debate about why they're not the greatest tomorrow or on Sunday, right?
Exactly.
So,
sounds good.
I've been Kevin Gallagher, Marc Charles on my guest. Thank you very much. Go check out AC Jiu-Jitsu. Look at my blog post. Check me out on Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast and Old Man Grappling Now and all those stuff like that, man.
All right, don't wear a mask.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, don't wear a mask.
Or wear a mask. Whatever you're comfortable with. Just don't fucking complain about it anymore.
Whatever you would like to do with your
I deleted Facebook 6 months ago. Somehow I still hear you fuckers. I don't know where the fuck you're coming from.
My dog. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.